and that will be sent out sometime tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. That'll come via email. Also attached to that email is going to be a questionnaire. A lot of our sessions that we end up hosting here in Career are based off of the feedback by students, alumni, even external people that might be joining us today outside of WGU. We welcome you, and we're constantly seeking that feedback to really try to shape the programming that we're running here. So certainly looking for that feedback. This session is part of Career Quest, which is a month-long career expo that we host here. We have fantastic sessions like this that Dave will be putting on where it's a specific topic, talking with industry professionals so they can share their insight. We also have sessions geared towards active hiring for WGU students and alumni. So great opportunity to connect with recruiters that are interested in chatting with you. So certainly take advantage of those opportunities. I'm going to share in the chat a little bit later on that questionnaire, also the Career Quest landing page. So if this is your first session and you're just joining us, or maybe you've attended a few, great opportunity to jump into some different sessions. I would say 99% of our sessions are recorded. So if you're not able to make it, I would still encourage you register so you can get that recording and take a look at that. Another great opportunity here, I see a few people have joined us, would really encourage people, especially with the current state of the job market, like you really want to expand that professional network of yours. So in the chat, if you want to drop in your link to your LinkedIn page, I would highly encourage that, connect with each other, and really try to expand that professional network, have some conversations with people. So certainly take advantage of that opportunity. And from here, what I will do is I'm going to pass it over to Sam. Sam, if you want to jump in, introduce yourself, and then we can pass it over to Dave.
Yep, to get rolling. Thanks, RJ. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming on. I know it's a tough time of year, especially with this weather. So I hope everybody stays safe and warm. My name is Sam Smith. I live in east of the Twin Cities here in Minnesota. I'm on WGU's strategic partnerships team, and so our work is really to go out and be the face at WGU for employers and people who are thinking about kind of the future of the workforce and the future of work. So I met Dave Swenson at a Minnesota Technology Association event where he presented on this same topic, and I thought, wow, we really need to get Dave in front of our School of Technology and our student and alumni community, because I think it's such a relevant topic, what Dave's gonna discuss today, and so we're really lucky to have him. So put some claps in the chat, virtual round of applause for Dave Swenson. Dave, I think please introduce yourself. I don't know that I have your full. I know a lot about you, but I want you to kind of make sure that you're telling the story you want to tell here. So I think we'll jump in, guys, and I really encourage you to ask questions. Seems like we've got a intimate group, and so this is your time to really pump Dave for all he's worth in terms of getting 30 years of technology experience to bring to bear on your own career development. So let's get rolling. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, good. We're good to be with you all. As Sam said, I've been at U.S. Bank based out of Minnesota for 30 years, largely managing application development teams. Before that, I worked for IBM for 11 years in kind of a technical sales and support role. The last 3 years have been involved in a new program. We have a rotation program where we hire recent computer science college grads and put them through 3 10-month rotations. And I get to work with them for that. It's just a ton of fun and a really great program for the bank. I'll start sharing my screen here. As Sam said, this was something that I did back in the end of last year with Casey Clark from WGU, and thought that it'd be something that we bring to students because it has some applicable content. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how I got into all this. it started with a program that we have at US Bank. There's a mentorship program, and you can sign up to connect with someone else in the organization. And I had gotten connected with someone who was a teller at the bank, and she was finishing her computer science degree. As she finished that, she decided that she wanted to get more into the business aspect than like the coding. So we started looking through job postings and found places where her analytical and problem solving skills could come into play. And after a bit of doing that, landed on a spot, and she got the job. Based on it helped having seen some of the bank, I think, from a different side. But then her analytical skills were what really helped her stand out. And since that time, have gone through a number of different exercises with folks. And I'll tell you some more about that down the road. But traditionally, what folks are looking for, it'd be a developer role, a tester, Scrum Master. These days the Scrum Masters are a little less prevalent in the industry as Agile teams are just absorbing that role, or like an infrastructure engineer. So that'd be something, working like in a network or a firewall kind of thing. The challenge is that over the last 3 years, the number of those jobs has decreased significantly, in a pretty dramatic change, actually. This MinTech that Sam had mentioned, is a trade organization, maybe call them, in Minnesota, focuses on technology in Minnesota, and every year does research along with another organization into some stats about IT in Minnesota. And that I think would, as I talk to people around the country, it sounds quite representative. And that kind of stunning figure was they quantified, what the drop was, and it was 23% fewer software developer postings year over year, which is a big number. And, in exploring some of that further, I think it's a day's opinion. I think it will swing back again, but I think just the kind of the geopolitical situation, companies are being more cautious. IT is a discretionary spend for companies, and I think there's just kind of some cautious wait and see. But then I was in a session with a gentleman who runs a mid-size consulting organization based out of Minnesota. And someone posed him, another flavor of the question is AI the big job buster? And his response was absolutely not. He just doesn't see it. He said the AI is not mature enough, to have a major impact on hiring right now. He was seeing it more as companies around the region were opting to do offshoring for a lot of, in particular, the entry-level positions. And he saw that as being by far the biggest impact on hiring right now. And that jives with what I see. And as I talk to people, around the city, this MinTech organization, if you're not familiar with that, just do a Google search on MinTech. Minnesota Technology Association is the full name, but MinTech, kind of what it goes by. But it does these surveys every year. But as I talked to people there, it was consistent that, they didn't see that AI was the big job buster. It was really, a wealth of other things and more kind of the discretionary spend. Another statistic that came out of this MinTech survey was, however, though, as they were surveying companies and looking at anticipated demand over the next 5 years, they saw in the neighborhood of 39,000 jobs just in Minnesota that were going to be necessary within IT. And so that's a big number. And just to put that into context, if you add up, every computer science graduate in the state of Minnesota, it's like 2,000 or 3,000 people. So over the next 5 years, that's not going to get to where it needs to go, and it's still going to be significant opportunity down the road. So what are some other alternatives then to that? And this is where some of the things that I explored with, this teller story that I had, and had been with a number of other folks along the way, and looking at some alternatives where they could use their skills. And it maybe was in a non-traditional IT job, outside of the IT department per se, in some other areas of companies. Things like doing data analysis and reporting, help desks. I talked to someone who works within US Bank who runs a help desk, and he said he would just love to hire someone who had a computer science background, because he said his toughest job in hiring is someone who can understand the technology, because it's just the core of everything that we do. And someone who was quick on the uptake of that, and then could navigate that and could help others with it and explain it. That would be, his go-to. Actually, he was saying quality assurance is another one, where having some knowledge of how things are supposed to work, how technology can work, it gives insights to make a better tester as applications and systems are being exercised. Monitoring, likewise, as we need to monitor the health of systems and see how things overall are faring, that having that perspective of technology helps to design better monitoring systems. Application and claims processing is maybe a less intuitive one that way, whereas when claims come in or applications come in a variety of businesses for different policies or programs or accounts, there's an analysis process that goes on to see if people will be approved. And there are some criteria, and there's decision making that goes on as part of that, that goes against, some key metrics that companies have for approval, and having an analytical mind and someone who can, process that well, would be a step ahead of someone without that background. Research analysts, every organization there is needs to be monitoring where it's coming from and where it might be going, and doing some projections. And someone who can, take data and synthesize it and analyze it. And that's what, this teller who I was mentioning got into, doing some of that kind of work. And it was a great fit, to have someone with the analytical chops to take on some of that. Risk management is an area where processes and procedures that surround technical activities. There's a group that does a high level monitoring of that, just to make sure that things are sound as a double check. Most organizations, larger organizations, have a function like this, and someone who has a technology background, is a good fit for this. And within the bank, people kind of move in and out of, kind of core technology roles. Like, there's someone who I was working with who was a high level manager within the technology group, moved over into the risk group because she understood kind of the basics of how the process is supposed to function. And so what does this come down to? There's some of these key, call them transferable skills that, comes from the technical training for one, but also as people have had a number of other experiences, in previous jobs. This becomes, some difference makers if folks are applying for roles, and having the analytical skills, the problem solving skills, people who can, process details and notice the differences between different trends, can see those patterns, and pick up new concepts. I was a physics major in school with a kind of a computer science minor, so I don't use any of my physics now, but learning the new concepts was a key thing, because almost truth is stranger than fiction in some of how things work. But having to learn new concepts, pick up new things, has been something I think that's been helpful, through my time. And this is a list that Casey Clark had presented at this conference, and I thought it was worthy to just reference back to, because these are, the on top of the transferable skills from one job to another. They're sometimes called power skills or soft skills. These kinds of things, again, are differentiators, and something that I think as students, to keep developing and maturing, how to give and receive feedback and adjust to that, how to deal with ambiguous situations, because so much of what we do isn't all laid out. And people I see who are able to take nebulous situations and kind of navigate that, those are the leaders that get additional positions of responsibilities. Those who can collaborate with others, because very little of what we do, is just all by ourselves, especially in larger organization. There's a group that does database, there's a group that does network, there's a group that does security, there's multiple application groups that contribute to any kind of solution. And all those folks need to work together to have something be successful. And then as part of that, just navigating complex problems. Because that's why we get paid as technology people, is to figure out challenging things. Otherwise, it would already have been done. And some of the end users who use the system, wouldn't need the technology if it was simple stuff. And so being able to navigate that is a distinguishing feature, for those who are looking for a job. So with all that in mind, kind of where does that leave us as far as next steps? Something that I have done with some of these people that I referenced, that I've worked through this exercise with, where they say, gosh, I just can't find an IT job. What should I do, or where would you point me? And have done searches with them, broad searches, using two keywords, the word data and the word analysis. And I surprised myself on this, because I got a taste of it with my first experience with the woman who was a teller. But then as I've done this multiple times over, it's just been reinforced to me the availability of roles out there for these non-IT jobs that can use skills for those who have been trained in IT. I did a search on Friday on the US Bank site, just to have a line in the sand. And in the area called technology, there were 19 jobs that were posted as of Friday. When I did a keyword search in the US for data, there were 116 roles that were asking for some aspect of that. And when I put in the word analytical and analysis, there were 212 jobs that popped. And so there's all kinds of things out there. They're a bit of the sleepers, but it's a way for folks to get into a role, get into a company, get domain experience with that company, have something to pay the rent with, while I can kind of survey the surroundings for something that might be, more of a core, Java coding role. But there are these many of these things out there, and the analytical folks are the ones who will get the nod for some of those positions. Another thing I'd strongly encourage is to work hard to get an internship. And depending upon the financial situation that you're in, even if you can, for part of the time, do one that's not paid. I'd say it's pays dividends down the road to have concrete experience on the resume to point to, working on real world problems. Schooling is great, and I think referencing school projects is important as part of a student's resume, but there's nothing like an internship to really show that someone can handle, the technology role that they might be getting into. And also something that's not intuitive is that, it's in September, August and September, where roles are posted for the following summer, when, our guys were going to school, and, our eldest, when he first said, "Oh, I'm going to the job fair," and I asked him, "Were you going to plan to get a job during the school year?" He said, "No, this is for next summer." And I just wasn't tracking on that one whatsoever. And as I say, that would be non-intuitive, something that far ahead of time. But I'd say be watching for that for both internships and for full-time roles after graduation. That many companies are out. The job fairs are in September for many schools, and want to be getting at it on those available roles at that time to get kind of first shot at some of those. So that's kind of the prepared stuff that I have, but would love to hear questions that you all have or things that you've run into, and we could talk through that together.
So if people have questions, please feel free to post those in the chat. We'll read them off to Dave, and we can go from there. But Dave, fantastic insights. I think that's just very helpful for our students, especially with just using the right search words for these opportunities. I think that's something that people don't realize. So great shout out there for people to utilize. But we'll open it up for questions for everybody. So feel free to post those into the chat. And Sam, I know Sam is ready to rattle off some questions, so we'll let Sam go first.
Thanks, RJ. Well, folks are okay. Great. I see some questions. I'm going to ask mine first, just to kind of get it primed up, because Dave, I think you mentioned something really critical, which is in this really tough labor market for those kind of traditional big bucket technology roles. You talked about at least moving into a company so that you can pay the rent. You can start kind of building out that social network. What does it look like at Best Buy for internal mobility? In terms of moving through, talk us through, if you will, hypothesize or theoretically, what could a journey look like for somebody who's a cybersecurity major who maybe starts out in a data role, or a software engineering person who comes into more of a business process, or something like that. What are the opportunities inside a corporation for that type of exposure and movement?
And I think there's a few variables to that, but I could maybe share my path at US Bank, because I've been there for 30 years now, and I've had 12 or 13 jobs over that time. Different tech stacks, the teams I was managing, different business domains. So I would say there's quite a bit. But I think some of the key elements there are, making an impact where you are, so that there are other opportunities that become available, and then the networking. Some of what was talked about at the top here. I think RJ was mentioning some of that. That networking is a big deal. There's a term that's more recent for me called 6 degrees of separation, and it was a study that was done, and it said that all of us are kind of like the friends of the friends. We're like 6 people away from knowing someone that someone else knows. As that network of relationships for all of us fan out. But as we lean into that and we connect with people, we let them know our interests, and give as well as take from some of that, help others with their search along the way as well. Doors open, and there's lots of possibilities there, because projects are coming and going, teams are forming and being reformed. I would say it's a very dynamic environment, and probably not, the dynamics of it aren't slowing down any. So I think, to your question, so I think there's a lot of opportunity, but I think one needs to keep learning, keep applying, and keep that networking going. I think networking sometimes can have a negative connotation, like you're trying to put on a show, or just brown nose someone or something, and it's kind of not in that sense. It's just having relationships. It's just connecting with people. It's, I know you, you know me, I'm sharing what I'm interested in, and others say, oh, I know a way that could maybe be fulfilled.
So first question from the chat, Dave, is a second business degree needed for those types of banking roles?
Yeah. And again, I'll give you a lot of Dave's opinion here. But I see very few roles that need a second degree. Um, some are interested and all good, carry on because, to scratch that itch and just to keep learning, that's wonderful. But as far as being required for a role, I see it not whatsoever. And I tell people, I think that you're better spending that hour, 2, 3 hours a week, working longer hours, applying yourself more, and you will go further in your role rather than studying outside of your daytime job. And then it may or may not apply to what you're doing in your day job.
Next question in the chat. Christian had a question as far as like experience, and Christian has a lot of different credentials as far as an MBA, a master's in cybersecurity, different certifications that might come with earning that degree here at WGU. Do you? And this might be another Dave opinion question, which is,
Okay.
I mean, hey Dave, that's why we're here. We're here to get your opinion on a lot of this stuff. So would you feel like Christian might be overqualified for internships geared towards specific undergrad degrees?
I'd say maybe so for an internship, and maybe just talking to the U.S. Bank internships. We only have it for those who are finishing their junior year right now, so very targeted there. At that set of folks. That's not everywhere. I think maybe getting into a role that maybe isn't a sweet spot to get that additional work experience, and maybe look at that as the internship rather than something that's a classical internship. Because what I'm most familiar with, as I see from other places in town, is it's often those who are in an undergrad program who are getting the internships.
And putting my career hat on, since I do work in the career office here at WGU, I would say it also depends on what are you ultimately looking for. So I think a lot of people think that to gain more experience, you have to do an internship, which isn't necessarily the case. Like, especially with that much experience, I would say it depends what type of role are you applying for. There's plenty of opportunities for you to gain that further experience. If you feel like you're lacking, it might be a micro internship. I know that there's a ton of opportunities there, but I mean, entry-level positions, I think, are certainly a great option to really gain that experience. So just something to think about moving forward. Really, I think it depends on what you're ultimately looking for. But I would certainly say, like with that many credentials, like you might be overqualified for those types of opportunities. Next question. Do you have any suggestions for Canadians trying to land a job in the U.S.? In this instance, I have 7 years experience in data analytics in the IT field.
Yeah. I think the thing that's challenging there, it kind of goes back to the job market comments we were making, that in order for a company to like sponsor someone to come in, that company has to prove that they can't find anyone domestically in order to take that role. So that makes it, when there's so many folks who are looking for a job, that it's hard for a company to make that case that they can't find anyone. So I think, unfortunately, like coming from Canada or other countries into the US, I think that can be something of a barrier. Unfortunately, yeah.
And Dave, I have a question,
Yeah.
and I hear this a lot from some students. In this particular instance, they're getting their degree in IT, or they receive their degree in IT, and they are looking just for opportunities, and they feel like if they do take a non-technical type of job, it's going to limit their long-term career growth. What advice might you give somebody in that instance that feels like, hey, if I take this, like this is going to limit the opportunities that I might have moving forward to where I'm ultimately trying to get to in my career?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to think about. Um, and I think it becomes a fine line on that. Yeah, ideally, you would look for something that is technology oriented. But as I look at resumes from students, having any job at all during summers versus having no job, I I lean towards someone who's found some job anyway, because I think those transferable skills that we were talking about. I think that's real. I think we all learn from any experience that we have in any working situation that we're in. I think the thing, if you can't find an IT role, you go ahead and take something, where you can apply yourself. And then as part of that experience, look for leadership opportunities or opportunities to grow yourself. And then when you're doing your resume, you put those on your resume. Like we have someone in our rotation program. He used to be a musician, and at one time he managed a restaurant. And the leadership skills that were gleaned, the interpersonal skills that were gleaned from managing a restaurant, very much applies, and we very much appreciate him and the well-rounded self that he brings to his job. But it was honed on a non-technology role that he brought into his current role.
I love that example as somebody that comes from the hospitality industry, and the skill sets that you pick up from that industry can be applied to any profession. So that's I appreciate that example.
Patience, if nothing
Abraham
else, right?
Abraham had a similar question,
Okay.
just in terms of the applying some of these skill sets and limiting career growth. But have you ever experienced a job market similar to what we're currently experiencing today with flood of talent, uncertainty around those traditional IT roles? What advice would you give early career professionals that want to strive to get to a specific role, and then might have to compromise in other areas, is compromising
Yeah.
to get their desired destination?
Um, yeah, I think there have been phases where, like the economy hasn't been doing as well, or something that's been going on, like the financial crisis back in 07 and 08. I think companies were definitely dialing back on their hiring in a similar way. So I think it's cyclical. Um, but as far as how to deal with that, I guess you're just back to the creative search as part of that, to look for things where you can still use your skills, still continue to grow, and maybe work towards something in a company. So some of that might be setting your sights on a larger company that has more varied types of roles. But on the other hand, too, some of the smaller and mid-sized companies, people become a bit of jack of all trades. So if you get into one thing and say it is highly oriented, more of a business role. Oh wow, you can do macros. Oh, you can do pivot tables, or you could do some little scripts to make something go faster. I've seen that snowball for people to where then they get moved into other things, and when something comes up, it's like, oh yeah, I'll have RJ work on that. I know he can handle that kind of thing. I've seen him do that. I bet he could figure something out.
Dave, I'm going to take the floor once more here.
Yeah.
And thanks for this too. I mean, these have been some awesome questions, from our chat, guys. I think it's important. Oh, something coming in from a mid-year professional. Let's go to this question. I'll pose this one and then ask my hopefully can kind of move towards wrapping up. But what advice would you have for mid-career professionals where there are no mid-level roles. So we're kind of talking less about early talent and moving
Right.
into
Yep.
that mature early talent. Where if there aren't any mid-level roles for folks who want to progress into some of these higher, these senior levels, what's the pathway? Is it a pivot, or is it really, how do you manage that? I understand that can be really tough, especially if it's an organization where you've built out that internal network.
Right.
Like our student or alum Hugh here. How do you manage that transition?
Yeah.
Or what's your opinion?
Yeah, definitely a challenging one. And I have gone through the same kind of exercise with exactly, that type of scenario with some folks too. Because I think it can go a few different directions. And so, the networking and just finding places to connect with others. Um, what would be some concrete examples of that? If like one in Minnesota, there's this MinTech we keep talking about. There's a quarterly gathering where folks get together and just visit. And I so enjoy that just for meeting people and connecting. And I think things like that, start to develop and open some doors, whatever kinds of things like that, could get connected with, or just doing some kind of informational interviewing. And as part of that, ask those people, after we've talked, is there anyone that you can think of who might be able to shed light on and what the things that we're talking about, or might have some insight into the skill areas that I have that might be able to give some concrete advice. And so, it becomes, a string of connections that way, but kind of asking that question at regular points. And it's a lot of what, say, a recruiter does when they're trying to place people in a job. Do you know anyone who does that? And have that be a regular part of conversations as part of the networking and connecting with people. But I'd say try to set up those coffees where you buy someone a coffee and say, can you just tell me about what you do? And it's learning more about the domain, learning more about the current state of things from their perspective. But I think that can open some doors. But then I think sometimes it might need to be a pivot. That's a tough deal because we have all this experience. As you say, we have the network from where we're at. And it's a little bit of a hard pill to swallow because it feels like we're casting some of that aside. But I guess having gone through what I've gone through with having, I'll call it a dozen jobs, over my time at US Bank, I really strongly feel that each of those develops something in us that is of use later on. That even if it's a different set of relationships, if a different thing that is directing our pivot, that we can pull from our past and utilize those skills that we've developed. And I worked with that once. I know a bit about that. Or I've run into this situation before. These are a couple questions that I know are good to ask in this situation. That kind of thing is something that it can turn what can feel like a challenge into a positive into those new situations. But it's challenging and it can be disheartening because you'd like to kind of keep building on where you're at, certainly.
It reminds me, Dave, during the session that you delivered with Casey from School of Business, we did have a couple folks stand up during Q&A. Like I'm sure a lot of these are, our students, and say exactly that, which is, I just got a master's in computer science, or I've been a coder for 20 years. I love being a coder. I wake up every day excited to tackle, the next set of problems, debugging, whatever. It doesn't matter. I just love it. But to your point, right, there comes a time when critical examination of kind of what are the opportunities around me, what are the trade-offs that I would need to make in order to get back towards that ideal dream job, which I think, one takeaway for our community here is that that golden role, has never really existed, right? It's really a combination of a lot of different factors and calculations that you need to make. But I think you've given reminded me, in terms of thinking about my own career, it is really about that process of taking on roles that add new knowledge and allow you to, I think the big key now in this new economy is how good of a problem solver are you and what can you relate to? So you just made mention of it, which is in your next interview, which most everybody's using that STAR method, right? Situation, task, action, response. If you've had a wide variety of roles, then you're able to just bring more interesting ideas out and really kind of establish your value. So I would say, in terms of our school of technology students thinking about how do we move forward in our careers or how do we enter into a pathway, it is about, as if you need to, really being open to kind of these lateral moves, which are, don't worry, your career, you're going to be fine in terms of your career even if you start out in a role that doesn't directly work with, in this case, software, or in other cases, cyber or data, right? So I think that's hopefully what we can, take away from this.
Yeah, and maybe an additional thought to that, Sam, that comes to mind that, if that really is a deep passion for coding, for instance, to keep up with it on the side, you keep the personal projects going, keep your fingers in it. And so then, as the opportunity may present itself, then you still have some good familiarity that you can bring to the situation.
And Dave's been talking a lot about Minnesota Technology Association, but which we love, but every state and every even large metropolitan area is going to have a technology association. So what I would recommend is, I just dropped a link into the Tech Councils of North America. Jump in there and see what your local organization is doing around programming for early career. MinTech from time to time has had something called Jumpstart, which is really focused on early talent here in the Twin Cities, and I'm sure other areas are doing something similar too. So, it's a big focus of employers to really match highly skilled individuals, especially younger ones, to roles and growth within the company, because they're going to realize a lot of value out of you all if they can keep you around and keep moving you into different roles where you can be impactful too. So I would encourage everybody to check those out.
We'll give people another opportunity to in the chat post any questions. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded. I know Dave has thrown out some fantastic information for people answering some of those questions. So if you missed anything or you want to go back and reference, this session is being recorded. Also attached is going to be that questionnaire. I'm actually going to share it in the chat in a second, as well as the other Career Quest sessions that we do have going on. Sam, I don't know if you had another question. I know that you had said that you had one. I don't know if you snuck it in there as part of that longer question.
Last question for me would be, what does the AI, what's that looking like in terms of your team specifically, Dave? Because I think, we all know about enterprise Copilot stuff, but how is AI coming into the development space, or are you seeing that being deployed by your teams?
Yeah, it's definitely coming into the development space, and it is a tool that surpasses what I would have estimated it can do as a development tool. And just the developer assist, something like Copilot, as I see what it can do, to start out a piece of code. I want something that does this, and okay, within seconds it has a starting place. Or I'm trying to understand this code that someone else wrote. Can you explain it to me? And it consistently gives a very nice overview of that. I think that as a tool in the toolkit, is extremely strong. And I wouldn't have guessed that it could do what it does this early. Or if you're like converting from C# to Java or something, and you say go, and it does an extremely good job, of getting a starting place, and it saves a lot of time. But the other aspect of it, as I referenced a little bit, as far as a job buster, I don't see it as a job buster. I see, it's a tool, and kind of every organization has a mound of work that they can't even see the top of, public or private organization, that they would love to have, more IT developers rather than fewer. And then it really just becomes the appetite of the organization, how much they want to invest in that, rather than the jobs are going away. Because I think it's not smart enough to where you can skip the person in the middle that's verifying what's going on, especially in the financial services, just the ramifications of turning over decision making to AI when it could affect customers. Even if it's 1%, we wouldn't do it. It just has to be super consistent. If it's just giving general information on something, it's another one thing. But if it's making a decision that's going to in fact impact a customer, it's just not going to go there. And so, there are some use cases where it's helpful, but others that it has a long ways to go before it's going to take over for us.
And I love that response, especially, and I feel like we always try to incorporate that in our line of questions. But I think too, like, people are so afraid of losing job
Yes.
opportunities
Yes.
to it, and not enough people are leaning in, being like, you know what, instead of me being so worried about this potentially replacing me, like leaning in and really learning more how they can utilize it in their job, and really maximize that, so that as they advance forward, like it's something that they're leaning on and they can bring it into future opportunities. And I think, too many people are afraid of what technology can potentially do moving forward, not enough of leaning in and really mastering and maximizing what could potentially be there. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thanks for
I
asking
think
that,
that's it,
Sam.
RJ. And I think too that it's a phenomenal learning tool. So for those I see who are earlier in their career, I see them honestly using it more than those who've been around a while, to say, okay, I'm trying to do this. Show me how to do this. And then they can analyze the results, and it gives them a jump start so they can kind of catch up, to some of those around them. And so as RJ was saying, I think to embrace it and have some personal projects on the side in whatever kind of AI technology is available to you, to learn how to do this thing called prompting, where you ask it questions and what kind of thing does it answer, and then kind of studying the output, but challenge it, because some of the things that I wouldn't have thought to ask our capabilities. And that's some of our exploration, is the sharing of what it can do and how it can do. This it can do pretty well. This, you should try this that I tried. Oh, I never would have thought of even creating a prompt like that. So just the creative exploring of what the possibilities are there, I think is time well spent.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So I did want to give, well, first, Dave, thank you so much for jumping in
Fun to be here.
and
Fun
presenting
questions too.
this. Like fantastic information that I feel like anybody, no matter what profession that you're going in, you could take that away and really apply it. I do want to give you the floor though, Dave. Like any closing remarks that you wanted to end on, anything that you wished we covered, or you wished we asked, that you feel like would be crucial for individuals to know moving forward?
Yeah, maybe I guess it'd just be a word of encouragement that, because while the job market might be tough, for one, I think just knowing that it's tough and kind of validating, I think is helpful. It maybe is just a little salve on the sore. But I think that's important to know that, it's not just me, that this is a very broad-based thing going on, where, there's slowness in kind of most industries, in most areas of the country, from my observations. I certainly don't claim to be an expert there, but just from personal observations. I think just knowing that that's the case is helpful. And I think knowing as well that it's hard. And I hear from people in all industries for any job opening, they use the word hundreds, if not thousands of applications for one role. And kind of no matter what it is, healthcare, whatever, I hear the same thing going on. So again, you're not to be discouraging from that, but more validating that that's just the state of stuff. But then having those connections, being able to, kind of push through maybe to some of these other avenues that others aren't pursuing to get, a lane into a company in order to get other opportunities to be more readily available, because just consistently companies will hire from within more readily than from without. And someone who knows the business and then can add, on top of that, the technical layer, will get a preferential treatment as opposed to someone who, is completely outside and doesn't know the business. So that would be my word of encouragement, just to keep after it. And, potentially, going back to it, if you can even help like a family friend or something, or someone who owns a small business. Hey, you want me to like help you with your website for free, even a few hours a week, just to get some more experience, and I'll tune it up for you. I think a lot of organizations would be open to that, for profit or not for profit. So I think just thinking more broadly and creatively how to start to assemble some of those experiences on your resume that will differentiate you, maybe will help, push through, some of the tougher situations.
Fantastic. We really appreciate, just your insight, your expertise, sharing that with us here today. Sam, in the chat, I saw that comment. I want to give you an opportunity too, if you had any closing things that you wanted to share, that you feel like would be crucial for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what Dave said, we need to repeat, which is companies spend a lot of time thinking about how do we get the talent in and how do we keep them around and how do we grow them, right? Most of my work as a corporate partnerships person is with Dave's colleagues over at US Bank Learning and Development, or the Learning Business Partners, where we come in and we deliver the types of experiences that help their current workforce move up and take on new skills and start tackling new problems within. And there's a business reason, but there's also a culture and fit reason there, right? That companies are really looking to invest internally. So I think the advice, from Dave, which is to find your spot inside a firm and then take advantage of all these rotations and these other opportunities. That's for me, if I think about the folks I work with, I think they would. That's exciting to hear people, who are eager to move up and take on new roles, stretch roles, stuff like that, and really just continue to work inside the same firm. And so that's, I think, I just want to double click on that. I saw one more question, but I'm not sure. What capacity is AI integration within your company? I think we spoke to that a little bit, which is, it's even at US Bank, it sounds like it's inside the developer environment, and so it is kind of assisting their coding. But then everybody's probably thinking about I'm sure all your teams and
Very much so.
maybe Dave, yeah, do you have the chief AI officer? Is there a kind of a working group, or how does that deployment of AI, what does that look like at US Bank? How are you approaching it?
There's a bit centralized and a lot of bit decentralized. There's a AI Center of Excellence, and a number of those folks have PhDs in artificial intelligence, and they deal with the toughest stuff, and just really getting down to understand the deep underpinnings so that it can be more repeatable. So if you have a large language model that gives you an answer, why does it give you that answer? And just getting to that point so it can really be manageable. But then that's the centralized part, but the decentralized is, basically every development team is looking at it. And if, for sure, from a developer productivity standpoint, if not for how could constructively an agent be used, and lots of situations of folks exploring that. So it's all over. Yeah.
Fantastic. Dave, thank you again for jumping in. Like I said, sharing these insights. Fantastic job. I think, like I said, I think people can take away, anything from this presentation and really apply it to what they have going on. Really hammering home that point, like, hey, getting your foot in the door and then navigating from there. So I want to thank you for taking the time, putting together the presentation and then coming in and sharing these insights. Thank you, Sam, for setting this up. I think this is fantastic, and thank you everyone for jumping in despite some weather issues. I know some people are probably experiencing. We appreciate you taking some time today to jump in and gaining some great insight. So thank you to everybody, and have a fantastic rest of your, what's today? Monday. It's been a woozy.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Stay warm.
All right. Bye.
Bye now. Thanks, Dave.